The presence of God. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord God, we thank you for the opportunity that you have given us for today. We trust in your wisdom as we seek to work hard to make it secure and prosperous. May God practice be cornerstones of everything that we do. Come reveal new openings and areas of expansions and development. And may this seminar flourish, create great opportunity and provisions for all those involved. This we ask in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. Father, the Son, and the Spirit.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
Hail, beloved Trinity, may all thy colors wave high. You're the bride we hold so dear, to thee we pledge our loyalty. Beloved alma mater, come behold its glory clear. May our lives enlarge thy fame. Trinity's noble name. Hail, beloved Trinity, may all thy colors wave high. You're the pride we hold so dear, to thee we pledge our loyalty. Beloved alma mater, come behold its glory clear. May our lives enlarge thy fame. Trinity's noble name.
and from the German embassy, and to our administrators and faculty and students. I am very happy to be here with you on our very interesting program for today. I hope our guests will feel welcome and we're able to have a lot of interactions within the day with them and learn a little bit more about German and German culture, and also about traveling and other things. So enjoy the program. So thank you for being here. So good morning, everybody.
Honorable guests, I have the honor to introduce our guest of honor, Mr. Kai Tomzig. He is a career diplomat and has been working on the German Foreign Service since 2006, prior to heading the Cultural Department at the Embassy of the Federal Republic of Germany in Manila. He served in Belgium, Nigeria, the United States, and at the Foreign Office's headquarters in Berlin. He is also married to a French journalist. Please welcome Mr. Kai Tomzig. Give him a warm round of applause.
I hope you can hear me. I hope you can hear me well. Good morning, everyone. Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me today. It's a great honor to be here. It's my first time at Trinity University, and it's been a very warm welcome. So thank you again. I have prepared a small presentation which is exclusively photos. So you have to listen to what I say and not read what it says. But I hope you enjoy it. And if you have any questions, just raise your hand at any point. And of course, we'll have the opportunity to do a little Q&A afterwards also. Exactly. So this, just to start, this is Germany within Europe. And I'd like to start this off just with a few questions. Maybe some of you have been to Germany or have read about Germany. How many inhabitants does Germany have? Does somebody know, more or less? Any guesses? 80 million over here. Somebody else? It's pretty much correct. We're at 84 million. So we're less people than the Philippines, but we're 84 million. Very good. Does Germany have islands? And don't use the map is not necessarily accurate because you don't see, but does Germany have islands? The Philippines has over 7,000, but does Germany have any? Does anybody know? We have 20. So it's a very small amount, and they're significantly smaller than the islands in the Philippines, so we do have 20 islands, and touch on that later. Without counting and without looking at the map to cheat, how many neighboring countries does Germany have? 9. 9 is correct. So we have a unique location within Europe. As you see, we're surrounded by 9 neighboring countries. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Schengen area protocol. We don't have border controls within that area. So if you fly to Germany, and I think the idea is, if I may say so, to go to Germany or go to Europe on a study trip at some point, once Chad allows it again, you can actually drive through all these 10 countries, Germany and the 10 neighboring countries, without passing any border control, without applying for any secondary visa, which is quite unique in the world. My last question, and then I give you some background on tourism in Germany. What's Germany's capital? Berlin. What was Germany's capital before that? Does anybody know? It was Bonn. Bonn used to be Berlin has been Germany's capital since reunification 32 years ago in 1990. Before that, it was Bonn, a city in the western part of Germany. Close to the Netherlands, actually. You can see it on the map. Okay. I think we can go to the next slide, please. To give you some background about Germany, the COVID pandemic hasn't impacted German tourism as much as it has somewhere else. Of course, there was a dent in numbers in tourism, but it was temporary, and we're getting back to normal numbers slowly. Approximately 10% of the German population work in tourism directly or indirectly. That's around 8 million. Should I use this? Does this work? Yes, this is better, thank you. Approximately 10% of the population, so 8 million people, work in tourism directly and indirectly. I believe this number is higher in the Philippines because tourism has a larger share of the GDP in the Philippines. But to give you an idea, German tourists did 52 million trips abroad before the pandemic in 2019 and 35 million trips abroad after the pandemic. So you see there's a significant dent. We're getting back to normal. Maybe I'll touch on some more numbers afterwards, but for you as tourists, for students of tourism and hospitality management, of course, being in Germany at some point or working in Germany might be a paid opportunity that you have, might be something that is interesting to you. But on the other hand, you will probably meet many German tourists abroad, also in the Philippines. So it's interesting also to know their background. Germany received 40 million tourists before the pandemic, 2019. We received 11 million tourists in 2021. So you see that there's also significant data about the tourism. So it's around 44% less visitors. I think we can go, I'll show you Germany, yes, one slide back. You see Germany, you see lots of different colors. Germany is a federal state, so we have 16 different federal states. They all have their own tourism programs, but I'll give you an overview today about the whole of Germany, how Germany is set up, and some of the main and most important touristic sites in Germany, and what is tourism today, or what tourism is about today in Germany. I'd like to start with the national parks. We can go to the next slide. All right, so this is the first photo I wanted to show you. This is Saxon, Switzerland National Park. And you have more than 1,000 of these freestanding stone peaks. It's actually quite impressive. It's a landscape that you wouldn't necessarily expect in the middle of Germany. And it's very popular for rock climbing. There are 20,000 rock climbing routes in this national park, as well as lots of options for hiking. For example, the Painter's Way, that is 112 kilometers long. So you can imagine that this is not something that you do as a day trip. It's not here you go, you take your van, you go up Mount Araitan and you're back in the same night. But you actually have to go, and it's something that you do over several days. We stay in small hotels or guest houses over the time. In summer you can also go camping, but this is very popular. We have lots of longer hiking trails in Germany. We go to the next slide. You might recognize this. This is the Black Forest. It's also a national park, the Black Forest National Park. It's a nature reserve that covers 10,000 hectares or 50,000 acres. This is basically a third of Metro Manila is covered in forests, and it's something that you can explore. The mountains in that area are up to 1,000 meters high, so it looks a little bit like a valley there, but it's actually much higher than it looks. And these areas developed in this way because in this area of Germany, the Black Forest National Park, there was no human intervention for more than 100 years. So that's why it's very impressive to see that, to see how it developed without any interference from construction, from traffic, or other human intervention of that kind. It's also a habitat for nature lovers of the peregrine falcon, which is the fastest bird in the world. Next slide, please. And the pygmy owl. I'm showing this because this is the smallest owl in Europe, and it's basically the size of my fist, or the size of a tarsier. So we have our own very interesting small animal there. You can do a lot of activities in the Black Forest. You can go hiking, you can go bike riding, you can even go rafting on the rivers there. And the Black Forest is also famous for one of its culinary specialties, Black Forest cake. We mentioned this previously this morning. Next slide, please. I mentioned the islands before, and while we don't have many, we have a few that are very interesting. We have 20 islands in total, and we have very long natural beaches where people like to soak up the sun but also go for long walks. This is the beach on an island called Usedom, which is 70 meters wide, 42 kilometers long. And to put this into perspective, it's like putting Boracay after Boracay 5 times. This is just the length of this one beach. So you could run an entire marathon on that beach without stopping. The island is in the Baltic Sea, so on the eastern side in Germany, and it's very popular for families. It's a particular, it's very known for a seaside resort that if you go to Usedom you will immediately see. And it was already a holiday destination for nobility and celebrities in the 19th century, so it has a lot of tradition. Very, very interesting destination in Germany. You go to the next one. Show you a different beach, much, much smaller. This is the Wannsee bathing beach in Berlin. So if you work in Berlin, as I did before I moved to the Philippines, this is where you can go to the beach. It was opened in 1907, so it's also older, more than 100 years old, and it's the largest inland lake resort in Europe. Listed as a historic monument. The beach there is only 1.2 kilometers long, so significantly shorter. What is particular about Germany, and that sometimes shocks people outside Germany, is that both at the Wannsee bathing beach and at Usedom, there are areas that are reserved for naturists. That's something, naturist means people who go to the water naked. It's not something that you have to do when you're in Germany. It's something that I never did, to be honest. But you just have to know that if you go to German islands or to German beaches, there are areas that are reserved to naturists, so people will be in the sun or in the water without them. You go to the next one. Another way of seeing and enjoying the water in Germany is by many lakes. This is the Pulvermar Lake or Pulvermar Nature Pool in the west of Germany. And it's an area that's also something you're very familiar here with the Philippines. It's a bit like our version of Lake Taal. It used to be a volcano. It's an inactive volcano. It's now a very idyllic place for families to go to during vacation. There's a large camping site along it, but it's also a very, very clear water lake that is over 70 meters deep and one of the primary tourist destinations in that area of Germany. And in the evening when you go, because it's surrounded by woods, it's surrounded by lots of nature, you can hear the birds stage a concert, you can see dragonflies fly around the water, and you have the illuminated camping sites in the side. So it's a bit like a fairy tale. The picture doesn't necessarily do justice, but if you have the chance to go to this part of Germany, to the Eifel region, it certainly warrants staying there for at least one night. Talking a lot about water, because I feel like that's something that we share in Germany and the Philippines. This is the Isar River outside Munich. Close to what you see in the background is the Alps mountain range that has the border basically between Germany and Austria. And there are numerous swimming spots along the river. So people who live in Munich, it's one of the trendy, larger cities in Germany. They go for the day or they go on the weekend with their family and they swim there. You just have to know the water is icy cold. It comes from the mountains. You mentioned that the temperatures of this water are not like in the Philippines. But you can warm up in cafes nearby, and since it's in Bavaria, you know, Bavarian culture is very strong in beer and food. You can be sure that the next beer garden is never far away. I'll show you this also. This is not the same river, but it's also Munich. This is so-called Eisbachwelle or ice river wave. It's a natural wave actually that occurs on a river in a park in Munich. And it's become so popular that people go surfing there now. So basically, if you're ever in Munich and you want to see people surf, you don't have to go to the ocean to surf in Germany. You can just go into a park in Munich and join the crowd. Line up with your surfboard and surf. Next time. Show you the map just quickly again so you can familiar with that. So as I mentioned, Munich is really much in the south. In what is this brownish yellow part of Germany at the southern border, close to Austria. And the island I mentioned, Usedom, the large beach, is exactly the opposite on the top part, northern east part, where the bright yellow, the light brown part is, just to give some overview. these are the islands on the northern sea of Germany, or basically northwest. We have Wangerooge, or Wangerooge, is the one that's the second from the right. I don't know if you see it. And it's very interesting, this area, because you see that between the coast and the islands, you have some kind of opaque space that is not really water and it's not really land. And the tides in this part of Germany are so strongly that when the water goes away, this is almost fully exposed. So it's probably too far to go from the mainland to the island, but you can go for long walks in the ocean basically, because the ocean has withdrawn so much, and you take a guide for that so you know when the tide is coming back. But it's very interesting. Wangerooge is very small. I think Wangerooge is probably the same size as Boracay, but it's a known health resort and spa. And there's two things that I find very interesting. One is Wangerooge is car free, so you can't bring your car. Nobody has a car. Everybody rides their bike or walks because the island is small, or you have alternative transportation. And Wangerooge outside the season has only 1,200 inhabitants. It's a very, very small island. But they receive 1 million tourists per year, or they have 1 million nights of tourists, I should say, not 1 million tourists. But you can imagine that for every resident of that island, you have 1,000 people staying overnight. That's quite impressive during the summer, you can imagine. This is a picture of Sylt. So it's a very, very particular, very typical of German coastline that you have there's actually three things that are particular about German coastline on this picture. You have a white sand beach that is very white. You have the dunes behind it, which is also a feature that you see in Denmark because it's the same regional space. But you have to cross the dunes to get to the beach. And you see those little wooden cabanas on the beach that people rent and sit in, because it's the north of Germany, so the temperature is a bit lower. It tends to be very windy. So people rent this space for the day. So they're protected from the seasons, they're protected from the wind, and soak up the sun there or just read. I'll pass on to hiking, because hiking is something that is also popular both in both of our countries, and it's a large part of German tourism. There's actually lots of tourism groups that either come to Germany to hike exclusively or do at least one hike during their time in Germany. There are some glorious routes of really different categories. There's from the beginner to the expert. You can find whatever you want, whatever you're looking for. And there's really idyllic and diverse landscapes and the network of trails that also have excellent way markers. So you'll never be lost, you just follow the signs. But the German tourism office says it's the land of milk and honey for hikers and tourism. And there's a lot of tourism industry that is built around it. So you can do your hike and just carry your own luggage or carry a big backpack. But there's also companies that offer you luggage transfer. Somebody takes your luggage, you hike during the day, and then just like a miracle, your luggage is already at the hotel. So that's something that is very popular also. Do the next slide, please. There's one hiking trail I wanted to point out. This is the so-called Baltic Sea Coast Hiking Trail. It's Germany's most beautiful coastal route, and it starts in Lübeck. Lübeck is this city. It's very famous for its city entrance. This is the city entrance within Lübeck. The old trade city, old port city, and from there you do 400 kilometers. So this is something that you need, even as an experienced hiker, you need a good week for, or 10 days. Of course, there are also shorter hikes if you want them, but I wanted to point this out because this really goes along the ocean. It's very, very nice. You can start the next one. There's also one hike that is a bit shorter that starts in Heidelberg. And Heidelberg is one of the most beautiful cities in Germany, in southwest Germany, with lots of the traditional city center. You see the mountains that after you leave the city. So it's very interesting also as a base, even if you just want to go for a day trip hiking. It's just leave the city and hike uphill right away. And it's an area which is also very famous for wines. I'll touch on that a bit later. I think a hobby we share in the Philippines and Germany, especially since the pandemic, is also cycling. Has been considered an insider tip before the pandemic. It wasn't very popular, but it's getting more and more popular in Germany because you get to experience while you travel everything on eye level and at your own pace. There are long cycling routes. One, for example, from Erfurt in the east of Germany to Weimar that passes 14 UNESCO World Heritage Sites. So this is maybe one. There's also one from Eisenach to Wartburg Castle, which is in the middle of Germany, that covers 225 kilometers. So as an experienced cyclist, you could do that in a day. If you're on a race bike, people like me would probably need 3 days for that. But it's still very interesting because it's a flat pace, and the region around Weimar is known for its tranquil villages and vineyards, and it reminds some people a bit of Tuscany in it. So it's actually quite interesting. Do the next slide. Why am I showing you apples? Because there's also an apple route in Germany, or the Rhenish apple route in the west, that is all about apples and culinary delights. It has been built not around the nature and the cities that you pass through, but it has been built around food, which is very popular also. So you drive in the south of the Rhine Nature Park in the west of Germany, you pass blossoming orchards, you see strawberry fields, fruit farms, farm shops, lots of cafes on the way. And it's a route for bikers because in this area alone there's a huge range of themed tours for all tastes. For the next one. You don't like the flat ways, there's plenty of spaces and plenty of routes that you can do mountain biking again. This is a very interesting photo with a view of the Alps and the lake in Bavaria. So you can see that if you're into that and this is your sport, you can certainly find something. There's a variety of bike parks, trail centers, and also then a number of routes. And whether you're a beginner or a pro, you'll certainly find your way around. Do the next one. This is the Bavarian Forest, or we call it Little Canada sometimes. It's also a trip that takes you 7 days on a bike, so it's really for those aficionados of biking who really want to do that during the vacation also. But I feel like it's very interesting trail. So it's basically through mountainous and forested areas. It's a 700-kilometer trail. It's like riding your bike from Manila to Bacolod. You basically pass nature. You don't see many people, you don't see much nature. So I think that's very nice. And you don't have to organize this yourself. There's lots of information about this in tourism offices, all pre-planned in one-day stages. So this is something you can also break down and do on several trips. This is the so-called Erzgebirge, or the Ore Mountains. It basically connects two countries, Czechia and Germany, and also has a 160-kilometer biking route along these mountains. I'm showing you the logo of UNESCO because you know that there are many UNESCO World Cultural Heritage Sites around the world. There's a number of them in the Philippines. There are 51 of them in Germany. 3 are natural sites, so it's basically just about the landscape and the environment you're in. 48 are cultural sites, so they will be architectural examples of cultural heritage in larger cities. And 10 of these sites are transnational or transboundary. That means they stand on 2 sides of the border. One part is in Germany and one part is in another country, which also shows you that it's really easy if you go to Germany on vacation or you go to Germany on a business trip, just hop over to another country and basically see 2 countries in one trip. I'll give you an example. I grew up close to the Dutch border. If I visit friends, I live so close to the Dutch border that my phone changes network. My phone will think I'm in the Netherlands. It's basically 50. As a child, I could bike to my neighboring country because it's just 15 minutes away. So it's really interesting to do that. When we talk about we talk about UNESCO World Cultural Heritage, there are of course different places you could go to. There are 51 of them. There's some in Berlin, there's some in Munich. If you're into literature, the home of Goethe, Schiller, in Thuringen, Weimar in the middle of Germany has a number. And I mentioned Lübeck earlier. You remember the Lübeck city entrance to the old building? That's really a shining example for all Hanseatic towns and cities along the Baltic with a lot history of trade. And the medieval town in Germany is really one of the foremost examples of Gothic architecture and reflects Lübeck's illustrious past. So of course today it's one of our medium-sized cities, but back in the day, when international trade with ships was so important, Lübeck was really one of the most important cities in that area. Next slide. I think this is probably easily recognizable. You've seen the TV tower. This is Berlin. Berlin has been our capital since 1990, since the two German states reunited after the fall of the Berlin Wall. And in a way, if you go to Germany, you see it, you will realize that Berlin is a bit of its own planet. And it has little to do with the rest of the Republic. Many of the things I showed you, I introduced you, you will not recognize, you will not find in Berlin. It has such a special spirit. So if you go to Germany, but you don't go to Berlin, you will certainly miss out on certain things. If you go to Berlin, but don't go to the rest of Germany, you will miss out on the other things. It's really a thing that you should combine. You will miss out. Berlin, as its own, is a very popular tourist destination. There are 800 hotels in Berlin. Berlin gets around 14 million visitors per year. It's basically like the entirety of Metro Nürnberg to Berlin once a year. We have 56 theaters, musicals, and opera stages. There are more than 5,000 restaurants in the city, so it's actually quite large. And Berlin, when it comes to food and for going out for parties, is the destination #1 in Germany, and it's also the most top 3 in Europe, only behind London, I believe, and Barcelona. London and Paris. Of course, there are more than 10,000 German towns that you could visit. We have listed a small top 10 basically, but you can just go to the next slide. So there's Berlin, I showed you. Hamburg, this is an old part of Hamburg where they used to store goods for trade. It's very impressive to walk through. It's also our capital of musicals, if you're into music entertainment. All musicals are usually shown in Hamburg first. Go to the next slide, please. This is Bremen. Bremen is known for its historic city center and it's also known for Beck's beer, but it's also known for the city center and very narrow street, which is very interesting in summer to walk through the city. Go to the next one. I don't know if you recognize this. This is Cologne. Cologne has a gigantic cathedral that really sits above the city. It is very popular also with Filipino tourists, with Catholic tourists in general, but it's a very impressive church to visit. It belongs to a very vibrant, open-minded city, close to 1 million inhabitants. So for us in Germany, that's large. Compared to the Philippines, it's just the inhabitants of Makati. But for us in Germany, it's one of the largest cities. We go to the next one. What of course is also popular in Germany are the Christmas markets. We have entered the Christmas season in the Philippines. In Germany it starts significantly later, so you won't see any Christmas markets before December. We don't celebrate Christmas. We only celebrate Christmas in December. But if you travel through Germany, you're in December. Basically, in many cities you will see Christmas markets like this in the city center. Lots of stands with food, with music, with opportunities to buy gifts. And these are also immensely popular for tourists in Germany. And at the same time, they have also been exported around the world. So I believe we started this tradition. Germany has really started to put up Christmas markets on a large scale around the country. And they have spread around the world. London has a Christmas market, Paris has a Christmas market, Baguio has a Christmas market. I'm not saying Baguio copied it, but it's certainly there's similarities in what we like. Very good example. I mentioned opera, concerts, and theater. The Philippines love to sing and they love to see people perform and be entertained. And there's two things I wanted to underline because they couldn't be more different. One is the so-called Oberammergau Passion Play. I don't know if you've heard about it. It's a passion play. It's basically a theater piece depicting the last 5 days in the life of Jesus Christ. It's performed in Oberammergau, in a small town in Bavaria, by the residents of this village. It's not a professional theater company, but the residents of this village put up a show every 10 years. Every 10 years. So it was this year. The next chance you have is in 10 years, 2032, I believe. And this is also very popular among tourists from around the world, especially from Christian countries, Catholic countries, because this is not necessarily a once in a lifetime opportunity, but because it happens every 10 days, you see a lot of influx to Oberammergau. The exact opposite is the Wacken Festival. I don't know if you heard about Wacken. Wacken is a heavy metal festival, and there's also bands from the Philippines traveling to Germany to perform at this festival. It's one of the largest festivals just for heavy metal in Germany. That also takes over a small town. It's usually very quiet during the year, but once a year during the Wacken Festival, the whole town is painted black and overrun with tourists and music fans of that style. The next slide. When people talk about Germany or tourism in Germany, they think of castles also. And I wanted to start with one castle that you probably don't know, because everybody knows one castle, and I think you'll see that in the next slide. But we have a lot of them. Germany has a lot of history. In fact, we have 25,000 castles, palaces and mansions in Germany that bear witness to Germany's history of the 19th century above all. They can all be visited, or many of them can be visited. It's basically, you can walk through that. If you're a fan of medieval history, or of that time of our history, you can walk through them. And in all of the regions you have historic castles, palaces. Some are UNESCO World Heritage hidden gems. So if you're into that, if you've watched Downton Abbey, for example, you can recognize these areas. This is the palace of the so-called Taxis family, or Amber Palace. They were, in that region of Germany, actually inventors of postal service. This is how they made their fortune. They launched the European postal service in the late 15th century. And of course, they're not doing it anymore, but this is basically how they made their fortune. This is their home, the Taxis family, basically. If you go to the next slide, this is the castle probably everybody has heard about. This is Neuschwanstein in Bavaria. And it's a very powerful symbol all over the world. This is something that people see and they immediately associate with Germany. It's also a very popular destination, as you can tell. It was built by King Ludwig of Bavaria, King Ludwig II of Bavaria, who started to build in the late 19th century, 1869. And the interesting thing about this is that it looks a bit like a Disney castle, because in a way it has nothing to do with traditional styles of that time. But King Ludwig basically built his own fantasy world of myths and fairy tales. So it's a bit combining different styles. A throne room with 50-meter high ceiling, which was uncommon at the time. And some elements of the Middle Ages, but some elements that were just unheard of. This is why this castle is so unique. Because unlike the other rulers of his time, he didn't copy the style that was copied at the time, but he basically asked his architects build something really along this imagination, and it's one of the most impressive buildings in Germany, for sure. I leave this on for a second, but I'll pass on, just touch on something quickly. There's lots of spa resorts also in Germany, especially I think if you want to take your parents at some time, this is something they might benefit or profit from, although of course spas don't know age. I wanted to just point out two of them, because we have spas in the Philippines, you have spas in the Philippines, but I just wanted to point out two because they're very particular. One is called Baden-Baden. It's a chic little town in south of Germany that just has a stunning scenery, lots of stylish hotels, but it's really a city that is built around two things: spa experiences and gambling. So they have a casino, and they have hotels that are exclusively focused on giving spa treatments to people. So it's a very interesting atmosphere if you go to. I've been there during the pandemic, not to get spa treatments, but to see friends who were actually staying in the city. But it's an interesting experience not to just have a city that has a spa, but to find a whole city that is built around this experience. And then there's Bad Wörishofen, which is a very funny name, but you might have heard about the Kneipp method, which is very popular in Germany and around the world to treat medical issues. That was invented there. So the method of walking into water and treading water is very popular in this area. Next slide, please. I think Germans and Filipinos also have a common love for entertainment and for wine and for beer. Wine is very popular in Germany and a very special place where wines are made. At the moment we have 13 wine growing regions in Germany, most of them in the south, or almost exclusively in the south. Climate change has an interesting effect, and I don't want to be ignorant of the problems that brings it, because it's one of the biggest challenges that we have in Germany and especially in the Philippines, because climate change is affecting all in a very big way. But one small side effect that it has with the rising temperatures is that we're getting more areas can grow wine. So we have the steepest vineyard in Germany, but also really different varieties. Lots of red wines, some white wines that are very popular. Next slides. Beer obviously is something we're known for very well. Germans statistically drank 95 liters of beer per person in 2020. So it's something that is not only drank at large parties, but also at family gatherings and other events. And there are around 5,000 different types of beer that are brewed in Germany, and 1,300 breweries. So this is not only something that is part of our culture, but also it's a large part of our economy. And of course, when we talk about beer, we have to talk about the Oktoberfest. This is something that you probably heard of. It's the world's largest Volksfest, or celebration for a people. And it's funny because the Oktoberfest actually starts in September. It ends in October. It's 16 to 18 days long, so it's almost 3 weeks, but it starts in September. And it receives more than 6 million international visitors, or national and international visitors, every year. It's a very important part of Bavarian culture. It started in 1810. And if you haven't heard, this weekend or this coming weekend, there will be a miniature Oktoberfest in Manila at Soler Resort, hosted by the German club. Not with 6 million visitors, but with approximately 3,600 visitors. So this is something that could be interesting if you want to experience have this experience on a smaller scale. Camping is an interesting part of German culture, and I'll tell you why in a second. It has always been a part of German culture. Lots of kids in Germany grow up going on camping vacations with their parents. I did too. I spent some of my vacations as a child in tents, not only in Germany but also in France and Italy. There's a lot of campsites everywhere in Germany, and you have basically everything from very, very basic options like these, where you might have a forest or a field where you're just allowed to pitch your tent, to very luxurious campsites with very good facilities to take showers, with restaurants, with pools to entertain the kids. So you have every option from really basic to glamping. There are over 1,200 certified campsites in Germany, so anything for your taste. And it's a very economical way of traveling. Also, if you want to go to Germany, if you have a fixed budget, you want to see as much as you can during your time in Germany or during your time in Europe, or you want to stretch out your budget as long as you can while you are in Europe, then bringing a tent and going from campsite to campsite is actually a good way of doing that. You see the tents here. I want to show you a different picture of what camping means in Germany. This is also very popular in Germany right now. These sales of these camping cars have exploded during the pandemic. You can imagine that in Germany, as in the Philippines, for a while hotels were closed, Airbnbs weren't open, you weren't allowed to stay anywhere, you're not to go anywhere. But if you had a car like this, which is basically a miniature apartment on wheels, you could go on vacation, you could go somewhere else without being exposed to other people, without being exposed to larger crowds. So these vehicles are immensely popular in Germany at the moment. They go from campsite to campsite. And if you wanted to buy one now, you would have to wait probably around 2 years to get yours, because they're so far behind in production. So it's a very popular way to buy it. So this is also something that you might encounter when you travel to Germany or when you work with German tourists. It might be something that in certain areas of the Philippines might become popular at some point. It's certainly a way for you to get around also to rent this with friends. These cars, depending on which car you did, sleeps up to 6 people. So it's something you can also use as a family or as a friend. So this is more or less an overview of the trends of tourism in Germany at the moment, or the focal points that Germany has on tourism. There's a German tourism office that has a very professional website that allows you to find a lot of background and detailed information we've already just said. But of course we're also thinking, what is tourism tomorrow? Or what have we learned from the pandemic? What is coming up? What is there to come in the next 5 to 10 years, but also with the longer term in Germany? What is something that Germany focuses on? One of the main keywords or the main targets that the German Tourism Board has is to create livable regions and tourism acceptance. So what does this mean? Tourism in Germany has its challenges, like everywhere. It's also regional challenges. And as many parts of the world, there's a tendency of over-tourism. We don't have that problem in Germany as much, thankfully. But if you think of Amsterdam, Venice in Italy, or Boracay at Christmas or Easter, you can imagine that if there's just too many tourists, it's not being fun. So there's the idea of spreading out tourism more in Germany, getting tourists more away from the larger cities and more into the regions, and also creating individualized itineraries for customers through agents that help with that, through websites, through artificial intelligence also. But this is something that is certainly a trend to spread out tourism into the regions and to make sure that every customer gets their individualized trip, or a trip that is tailor-made to what they want. For us Germans, very important and at the core of basically everything we do at the moment, but it also translates to tourism, is climate protection and sustainability. We have a climate transformation that is ongoing and has been ongoing in Germany for many years. We transfer from fossil fuels to renewable energies, but of course that also translates to tourism. So how can we make tourism as climate friendly and sustainable as possible? How can we make people take the train instead of the car? How can we remove the hurdles to make everything as smooth as possible? How can we encourage and so how can we incentivize tourism operators to use vehicles with low emissions, electric vehicles, things like this? So this is something that is important everywhere in Germany, but especially in tourism. One of the challenges we see for the next years to come is also the human factor. This is something this is where you come in, or where colleges like Trinity universities come in. The corona pandemic has exacerbated a problem that we already had, which is a shortage of skilled workers in tourism and in other areas. So we're looking for skilled people who want to do a training in Germany, who already have an education to work in tourism. And there's a number of Filipinos also that sign employment contracts with German companies in the tourism industry. So we also have issued visas for employment in Germany in this field, or issued visas for the completion of vocational training in this field for people in the Philippines. Of course, when I mentioned artificial intelligence earlier, digital process can optimize the trip, can help make an experience easier when you plan your trip. But in the end, hospitality lives from guest to host contact, but it's from the exchange between people. So there's also only so much you can digitalize. You will always need people in tourism, and that's why it's very important that there are programs like this at Trinity University. Digitalization, of course, will influence the business. There's a number of technical innovations that have been ripe for success in travel for many decades, but they're coming to fruition. And one of the examples is that the beach chairs I showed you on the beach, for example, now have digital locks. So you can book them on your phone, reserve them on the phone, pay them on your phone, which makes this much easier. I mentioned that I wanted to give you a few numbers at the end. I'll do that now. As I said, after COVID, or basically the difference between 2019 and 2021, we had 44% less visitors. These numbers are stabilizing again. But it's a big industry for Germany. We had tourists from abroad coming to Germany, bringing 40 billion euros or 2.3 trillion Filipino pesos in economic activity. This is quite large. The domestic touristic market is even larger because Germans also like to travel within their own country, as Filipinos like to travel within our countries. We're talking about 13 trillion Filipino pesos, but it's a 15 to 16 trillion Filipino peso industry. So it's quite important for Germany as such. And when we talk about Germans traveling, in 2021, shortly after the pandemic, many of the destinations they chose and they went to were closer to Europe, obviously. The most popular country by destination and by far is Spain, and especially the island of Mallorca, which has a large German community, followed by Italy, Turkey, and Croatia. But there's lots of tourists also, and more that do what had effectively stopped during the pandemic. They do long distance trips. The numbers of tourists in the Philippines, German Philippines, also pick up. We realized that at the office that we have more demand, more requests from German tourists in the country. So if you start working in the tourism industry after your degree here in the Philippines, it's almost certain that you will encounter tourists from Germany. And I hope that with my presentation I give you a little bit of background or a small talk with them or exchange with them. And wanted to thank Mrs. Bautista for organizing this and the university for having me in Madam Instagram.
Good morning, everyone. This is my question po. I've learned that in not all, most of the shops in Germany pay cash only as a mode of payment. In connection to that, how did the Germans cope since the most transactions were done digitally during the height of the
Find that some
pandemic?
restaurants in larger cities only take cash, but if you go to the supermarket, you go to larger stores, they all take all kinds of payment. They take banking cards, they take credit cards, and you will find that there's ATMs basically everywhere. So it's really nothing that should worry you during your trip. But it is true that there are some places that only accept cash. During the pandemic, of course, lots of restaurants, lots of other bars and places like this were closed. So people would basically just go to the supermarket, and there they really prioritize payments by credit card. That up to a certain amount you can use your credit card without using the PIN. So that threshold was raised so that people would not have to touch anything, they just tap their credit card, and that usually worked quite well during the pandemic.
Thank you. How can you describe the process when you make a trip?
I think just like in Manila or the Philippines, it really depends on where you are. It depends on where you go. If you go as a student in Germany, I think because universities in most parts of Germany, the public universities in Germany don't require tuition. So education is free in Germany. As a student, you approximately need around 1,000 euros per month to survive. That's the amount that's requested of you. But it really depends on where you are. Of course, if you want to live in a posh area or in a very highly demanded area in Berlin, it would be more expensive than in the countryside of Germany. But it's not that easy to answer, but I think around 1,000 euros per month would be able.
What are some tips that you can give to us if we plan to travel to Germany?
Because you live very far, I would say plan in advance. That's really the number one tip we'll get, and also because there's so much to see, I think you really have to focus. You have to, depending on who you go with, maybe see if you want to have an active vacation, you want to go out and see more cities, you want to see cultural heritage, you want to be on the countryside. So this is something that you have to decide first. Coming from the Philippines, of course, the longer you go, the better it is. But I think if you have a week, for example, you can already see some highlights in Germany and even one or two of the neighboring countries passing over the borders. But Germany offers something for everyone. It's really up to you what you make out of this trip. Depends on the group you're with. But whether you want to be in nature or just go from city to city and go out in the evening, something you can easily do.
Are you required to get a visa? If
you're required to get a visa to go to Germany, yes. Yes, you are required to get a visa to Germany. It's simple. We have very short waiting times. The waiting times for visa application are only 2 to 3 weeks. It's something you don't have to plan very long in advance. And I can also say that our refusal rate at the embassy is very low. So basically, almost everyone that applies for a visa gets a visa to Germany. So that's something that we're very proud of. We're really seeing ourselves as not that wants to facilitate travel, even though we have to get a visa. But the process is actually quite straightforward, and we won't have to wait very long for it. Inclusion, especially of people with disabilities, for example, is something that we take seriously in Germany. Obviously, not every area of tourism can be targeted through this audience. Hiking or biking, for example, is not good, but there's lots of infrastructure in cities for disabilities, for example. And when it comes to diversity, you will find that Germany is a very open-minded country, especially the cities are very open-minded environments. And I don't think that's something that you find problem with.
You mentioned that Germany experienced millions of tourist arrivals with 4 million just in Berlin. Can you please give a specific plan or policy in sustaining, developing, and/or protecting the tourist destinations in Germany?
The numbers that I got from the German Tourism Board, Germany tries to really have programs, and some of the things I showed today are programs. There are really programs, for example, about hiking, about biking, to really target certain audiences that we maybe haven't targeted as much yet, to introduce the items in the Northern Sea that people wouldn't necessarily consider as a destination right now, but they might when they get to know them better. And especially with cities, Berlin sees a lot of tourists all year round. Munich sees a lot of tourists before and during the Oktoberfest. But I think it's also, so I mentioned, to spread out tourism and to diversify the audience and the destinations, also to introduce cities like Lübeck, cities like Heidelberg, show you the photo, to get people really experience also to basically get more tourists into the country, but not necessarily get more tourists into Berlin. We already have good numbers there, and we want to, as I said, we want to avoid the phenomenon of over-tourism.
So among all the tourist destinations you have discussed earlier, what is your most favorite and will recommend for us tourists to visit that will complete our travel in Germany?
Dutch border from the most western part of Germany, and yet I wouldn't recommend my own region. I don't know. I think Germany has a lot to offer, and of course the lower Rhine area, the west is also it's nice, it's a nice area to grow up in. But when it comes to touristic sites, I think what will be very interesting and a good combination of things is either going to the north of Germany and do Hamburg, the coastal region, and Berlin. Like as you see, Berlin is a very modern metropolis. Hamburg is an old straight city with all this old infrastructure, and the harbor, you can go to a musical, and in between you have the coastal region, lots of distant islands. I think this would be an interesting combination. Something you could do in a week, for example, or a bit more than a week without rushing. Or you do basically a similar trip, but in the south of Germany. You can do Munich, you can move from Munich, you can drive into the Alps for hiking in the mountains or for biking around the lakes, and maybe scout in the southwest of Germany, maybe on the small border towns with friends that have traditional city centers. Those are two things that I think are the highlights in Germany, that I would see. As a first-time visitor, I would probably do these. Either in northern or south.
My question is, you mentioned a while ago that Oktoberfest is the most famous festival in Germany. And during time of pandemic, how people in Germany celebrate such event? Is there any restrictions being implemented in your country pertaining to festive celebrations, most especially for the tourists? What are the adjustments that your country did to overcome the effect of the COVID-19?
Yeah, so there's a shortage of cities during the pandemic. The short answer is we didn't. The Oktoberfest is happening this year again, but we didn't have an Oktoberfest in 2021, and we didn't have an Oktoberfest in 2020 for exactly that reason. Lots of the cultural life and the celebrations in Germany, as in the Philippines, have stopped during the pandemic, especially 2020. There was basically nothing, no celebration. 2021 it started slowly. And I feel like this year we're back to normal. The Oktoberfest is back to its original size. The rate of vaccination is very, very high in Germany. And there are basically no limitations anymore. So even in indoor spaces in Germany, masks are encouraged, but they're not required anymore. So it's basically, with the high rate of vaccination in Germany, we believe that the pandemic is, it's not over, I would say that.
Good morning, sir. I'm Mr. Albert. Now, my question is, it has also something to do about food, no? Because Filipinos love food. No? I was wondering, what's the most popular chocolate in Germany?
The most popular chocolate, which helps, the better you speak it, the more chocolate you will have in Germany, especially if you work with German tourists. Also, when German tourists come to the Philippines, and they find somebody who speaks a bit of German, that's something that they will highly value, that will help them a lot of organization. So that's something, if you want to do it, if you want to do a language course on studies, within the studies, or with an app, that's something I can heavily recommend. But beyond that, I think you have the skill set you need to work in Germany, and you have to have it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Of appreciation, this certificate is hereby presented to Mr. Kai Tomsik for imparting his enlightening and valuable insights as a guest speaker during the on-site seminar entitled A Special Embassy Session, Rethinking Tourism for Germany, held on October 11, 2022 at Trinity University of Asia, Mandell Hall. Signed, Ms. Elaine Jamil F. Factoran, Program Chairperson. Signed, Professor Teresita Bautista, Faculty Advisor. Signed, Professor Julius Flores, Tourism Chairperson. And signed, Dr. Fernando V. Trinidad III, Dean, College of Hospitality and Tourism Management.
Good morning, you guys. Enjoy? Okay, so let's make this quick. First and foremost, I would like to express my appreciation to our speaker, Mr. Kai Tomsik. Let's give him another hand. Sir. For his valuable contribution to our special embassy session entitled Rethinking Tourism for Germany. Thank you, Mr. Tomsik, for speaking to our students and faculty about the culture and tourism of Germany. We definitely enjoy and learn from your excellent presentation. My deepest gratitude also goes to Mr. Boone Torben. Thank you, sir, for the visitation this morning. And I would like to also say thank you to the hardworking students of 3T01 and 3T02. Of course, our TUA administration, CHTM faculty, tourism faculty in charge, Ms. Terry Bautista, To our CHTM students, thank you. And to our technical team, thank you for making this possible. Thank you, and that's all. Thank you. God bless.